And the question is, thinking of where you come from this morning, what does you as a parish minister, what do others in their role distinctly offer so that people would look to you in terms of mission and older people?
Well, where do you start? Really, as a local parish church, we are seeking to be the body of Christ. And if our folks who are there on Sundays and during the week are engaged in the Christian faith, they naturally want to share their faith and care for their neighbour. And so, in many ways, there's a multiplicity of ways in which a local church is networking and supporting vulnerable older people, if I can put it that way, in our community, as well as older people doing the mission. And as you've described, they're good friends, good neighbours, naturally, but there are also, apart from the natural, generic faith-sharing, caring, compassion, in our church we have a number of practical organisational aspects. There's the traditional church elder who visits, who's there. We've got pastoral team who visits in between time, and many churches have got these. We've got a midweek service for older folks. There's fellowship there. There's all sorts of, there's a minibus that goes around and picks people up. There's the services that people will do and go to in Williamwood House and the local hospitals. There's an incredible network there. If someone is ill or there's some problems, there's a care and share organisation that will take out soup and meals, etc. So there's practical care. Apart from that, in the church, there's folks who work with, can I say WRVS or RVS now? There's of Give Their Time. There's folks who do Meals on Wheels still. There's folks who work in a very professional and voluntary aspect. It's very difficult to nail down any one particular area that the parish church, and I'm sure my friends would agree, that as Christians we are caring as a body of Christ in a whole myriad of ways. But our people, if I can speak for our congregation, and we've discussed this often, they want to do more to help the vulnerable, and they need a wee bit more confidence, as you said, Maureen, and a wee bit more support and perhaps more resources just to have that confidence to do a bit more. There's a lot of desire out there to assist, and we've discussed this frequently, and Neil's still to come to the congregation and speak to them about this. So, yes, lots and lots of things going on, and I'm sure typical parish church, many would be similar, and I think resources to do a bit more to help folks in a structural way. But there's lots, I'm sure you've got the same,
Sure.
Lots of things we do for the vulnerable groups. But if I can just finish with this again, that if it wasn't for those who are elderly, we wouldn't have the network of care that we have, because the older people understand the issues so much more, I think, than the younger generation do, who are so wrapped up in the young families and so wrapped up in careers. It's not possible to give the practical care that the church can fill that gap a bit. So, an exciting time. I think there's challenges there for us, but a lot of good heart.
And maybe some of the others in the panel may share some of the resources their organisation has got available that would help you and people like you in parish churches. Maureen.
Thank you. I mean, I'd like to emphasise that a lot of the work we do is very collaborative. So we depend very much on goodwill within the Church of Scotland, and have worked a lot with Ian over the years in terms of events that we've done about a number of the things that you have raised to do with understanding the nature of, spiritual care, the spiritual journey, but also end-of-life issues, and more recently, those connections between the parish church and care homes. So it's the outreach element that is very strong that we look to. What we particularly offer, I think, is trying to build that confidence, and we've done quite a lot of work with different congregations around dementia. So I see there a real partnership could develop between FEOP and Crossreach. We are not a dementia-based organisation, so what we do is harness people's experience and use it to best advantage. So that's a key thing. But what we want to make sure is that if you, as a parish minister, go to a care home, which isn't Crossreach, that there is a welcome and an understanding about why you are important to the residents, that it's for them. And, if you have staff that are not of faith, that they understand that faith is important for other people. And so that's a critical part of what we want to do, as well as acknowledging the wider aspects of spiritual care. So it's the roundness that we want to develop, and we can only do that by working closely with other organisations, because we all bring a perspective and a skill to developing this work.
And Maureen, just before we pass on, do you have a website? Do you have any resources that people, if they're not aware of faith in older people, could draw from?
We have a website, which is www.faithinolderpeople.org.uk, and we have a number of resources on it. And we've just started running a blog, and even Twitter. So we're moving on.
Great. Ian.
Again, I think there's a number of strands, and Maureen's picked up on a few of them there, because there's a great deal of cooperation required here, and I think it's about making the sum greater than the parts. And we've certainly enjoyed partnership and looking forward to expanding that partnership with people like Faith in Older People, with particular congregational connections like Mayfield Salisbury and various churches around Kilmarnocks and Kentigern's, not least amongst them, and various other places around the country, and other denominations as well, because our Golden Age project also involved the Scottish Episcopal Church in terms of the diocese in the north of Scotland, and I'm afraid of getting the name wrong, but it's Caithness and that general part of the world. So there's an important thing there. I think as an organisation, the Church of Scotland Guild has a number of ways in which we can get involved in this work with older people, not least because that's who they are again. And one of the things that I think has come as quite a relief to a lot of people is we're trying to give people in our organisation almost permission to be older. They've spent a lot of time saying our numbers have gone down. The only way we can solve that is by getting more young people in. And now we're taking a slightly different tack and saying, actually, what you need to do is make yourself an organisation people want to be part of and can see what they can give to it, what they can get from it, and that maybe the client group you have to look at is older people. And that can mean any age group probably from 50 upwards, by and large. Now, we're not going to say if someone's 18, you can't join us. And there are examples of people who are teenagers actually being part of guilds around the country. But the reality is that we have to look at the kind of people who have the kind of time available, the experience available, the resources available, the wisdom available to actually serve the church. That, from our organisational point of view, says we're not an organisation that's here to serve itself. We're an organisation which was established in 1887 to go out and serve others. And I think that's an ethos we should be trying to push again. As an organisation becomes smaller, it feels more vulnerable, it becomes defensive, so it's quite hard to do that. And there's a super tanker to be turned around there to some extent. But the opportunity lies there for an organisation like the Guild to do what it was designed to do, to serve. And it has three major tenets behind that: worship, prayer, and action. And they're carefully placed in that order. So it's a worshipping organisation which, through prayerful reflection, is then able to take action at a local community level, very directly, or at an international level through our partnership projects. And that can mean anything from some of the Heart for Art things we've seen, which found its origins in this very church, through working with homeless people in urban Scotland, through doing microfinancing projects around Scotland and abroad, right through to working with people building homes for the perpetrators of violence in Rwanda, building homes for their victims. And although our people can't directly go out with their bucket of mortar and their breeze blocks and build those houses, they're able to see theologically why we should be doing that and practically how we can support doing that. So again, that brings us back to the previous question about mission. So I think our organisation is able to do that with individuals and draw on that big pool of people who are there but not members of the organisation. We also, over the last couple of years, have worked with a whole range of people who are in this room actually on the Golden Age project. And that was a gift at the 125th anniversary of the Guild to the church to help it start to think about some of the issues around this whole business of how we work with, for and to older people. Now that's something that other people are doing bits of. And other people were already building on what that was. I mean, Mayfield Salisbury were already heavily involved in this area of work, and they were able to bring their expertise and their experience to that table. But out of that, we have this document, which is now here. It looks like this, but it's available from Guild Office. That kind of gets people into the way of thinking about the issue. Not just about care for people, but how we can make use of people, how we can deal with the loneliness that older people have, or make use of the skills that they have. And build on that in partnership with congregations, with Crossreach, with Mission and Discipleship, with Church and Society, whoever it may be within our own church, but how we can then together all sort of add a wee thread or a wee piece to the bigger picture. And I think there are huge opportunities there. I mean, in the previous existence, I was General Secretary of what was then called Parish Education, and looking back, it's now essentially part of Mission and Discipleship, but looking back, we were always very keen in how we looked after younger people. We were always happy to appoint a youth worker or a children's worker, and no harm in that. But looking back, I confess, at no point did everyone say, what are we doing about older people? And there's a hint of taking people for granted there that I don't like looking back. And I think maybe that I want to say a wee bit more about this later on, but I think there's a whole area of work that we could be involved in ecumenically and within our own institutions that starts to acknowledge that particular and indeed that majority segment of our congregations. And why are we taking that kind of age group for granted? And rather than doing the kind of things that FIOP have been pushing for many years. But are we more conscious of that? Are there ways that we can start to address the issues around worship, prayer and action for older people?
Thank you. Sandra, I'm conscious that as people are getting more and more questions, we're getting slightly longer in all our answers, so just try and keep ourselves focused as we move through, but that's great, thank you.
I suppose we were actively pursuing one particular model of developing the work, and we decided to tackle some of the elephants in the room. So we dealt quite openly about dementia and had some very comfortable meetings about a very difficult subject. Mary Marshall, who was formerly with the Dementia Studies Centre in Stirling, absolutely engaged with a very full room, sort of 60, 70 people. Some were families who were dealing with people with dementia, and some were people with dementia themselves. Some were younger people who were just exploring the whole subject. But it was a very, very good dialogue about the issues. So, these were people who came not just from the church, from other churches, and certainly from our local community. The humanists turned out in force as well, which was very encouraging. And so we followed that up with some workshops, sort of smaller workshops about the practical aspects of dealing with dementia. Now, we're hoping that we're a dementia-friendly church, but we're not. That's not our whole being by any means, and we certainly don't want to set older people apart. But we then decided, well, if we got on all right with dementia, let's tackle death. And looked at, Mark Hazelwood came and talked about good life, good death, good grief. And again, large number of people came to talk about something that was clearly a worry in their whole spiritual comfort, if you like. And so, these sorts of subjects have become something that we are prepared to tackle, and that people recognise that might be something that we can do. I think for everybody. We've also been looking at the ways in which we can engage with the whole wider faith and spirituality question. And an audit of who you have in your congregation is quite useful. You suddenly realise, well, we actually have a very, very practiced person who can deliver godly play. We didn't know about this. I mean, we did know about it, but we didn't know that this was quite such an opportunity. Who else is in there? What other agencies in the mainstream are around that we can engage with? So we're not putting ourselves in a box, in a corner, that we're part of the whole wider debate. And I think that's something that we would hopefully feel that we were getting more confident about doing. I think we also have some amazing role models within, when you start doing this audit, who's around? I mean, when a woman of 101 reads the Trist at a Remembrance Day service, I mean, that's a pretty emotional experience, and it's a very powerful message about a clear, firm, solid voice from quite a frail old lady. But it was a very moving experience, but it said a lot of positive things as well. So I think where we are at the moment about this and where we fit into the bigger picture is actually about trying to engage very much in the mainstream, as well as deliver what we see as our faith mission, if you like.
Okay, thank you very much. Alan.
It's been interesting listening. What can we offer from Crossreach? What can I offer from my position? I think there are a few challenges here, I think, for the church, and a few challenges for us all in the panel and here today. I think one of the initial challenges is what's already been said about average age of church being 62, if I've picked that up correct. And if
Just in Glasgow.
yeah, if that's what we constitute as an older person, and if we are a church creating a mission to do God's work here on earth in a variety of different guises, then if the church is a group of people in the community, working actively in the community, then surely we have to look at that and say we have to use the strength of what's within the church. So why do we as a church continually look outside to try and find skill, expertise, support and advice and information when it's sometimes staring us in the face? And we sometimes then go around quite a interesting journey, which can take a very long time to reap any fruit and to really have a meaningful impact on communities and on individuals. And what I'd like to say in terms of what Crossreach can offer is that Crossreach is the church. It's the church's social care arm. It has been ministering and providing care and support for about 145 years. And although I don't clearly have 145 years experience, and certainly may look like I have, but to give a few examples of how Crossreach are carrying out the mission of the church and connecting with the church and bringing it back into the circle. We're connecting with the Guild in a remarkably meaningful way through our Heart for Art service, which has been a true journey of involvement and a real attack on the stigma which surrounds the diagnosis of dementia, from an unashamedly non-medical model and from a very overtly clear model that this is a church-operated service. It runs from within a church. It does not run from a medical centre nor a health centre. It doesn't run from a care home. So the stigmas and labels are gone straight away. If the church is the community and people come into a church hall, you don't say, there's Alistair with dementia, or there's Alistair with a learning disability, or there's John who's got issues with support because his wife's dying and he's away to get some support. You just see people going to the church, and church halls and churches are used for a variety of different community uses now. So the Heart for Art group has been a remarkable support to people and a remarkable support in getting that mission out. Because what we've done is not just supported people with dementia. We have given what Ian was saying about looking at older people and using the expertise. There are many Guild members, now volunteers in the Heart for Art, who have been trained by Crossreach on a certain level of dementia understanding and awareness, which is giving confidence. We have, through that process, enabled a number of training sessions to take place and information sessions about our other work and our wider work, which enables people to make that connection at night. So I'll give you one particular example of a gentleman who had stopped going to church and found out about Heart for Art. And he found out about Heart for Art from a Guild member who found out about Heart for Art from a talk from Crossreach and went along and became a volunteer. And what we tried to get the message out is a creative art group which lasts for 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, for example. But this particular gentleman is isolated and lonely in his own home and had stopped going to church and wasn't being visited from church. He was on the roll, but he wasn't getting any support. Through this church being active, Crossreach being active in the middle of that, the Guild being active in the middle of that, this gentleman now receives 2 and 3 visits a week and has now started reconnecting and coming back to church. Now, what does he need to get to church? He might need a little support with transport, but how many people come to church and go in the same car together, irrespective of what age they are or ailment they have? It's a social thing where they'll come together before church, they'll come and they might go for lunch afterwards together or continue some of the kind of debate about what they've heard that morning and worship. So that's one of the kind of things I'd like to say. The second is about that whole component about if we use what we have in front of us and in among us, then the spiritual nature and the values that Maureen spoke about are real. So the mission is real. If you bring someone in externally to try and understand the mission and try and understand what it is actually all about, you may get the educational component, but you might not necessarily be able to attach that to the values and ethos and the way in which the church wants to expand that work. And I think that's really particularly important. So Crossreach can offer that, and we do have a website, and it's crossreach.org.uk, and we do use social media as well, and we do have connections across most local authorities in Scotland and many churches within Scotland. But I think it's really important to think about the isolated older person at home, and not just the person who's receiving care, the person who can't get to church but would like to get to church, the person who has no friends and no relationships that they can connect with. And we can talk about how we can find out more about palliative care or about dementia or any of these type of things, but what are we doing to connect with these people who may have been part of church before? And I think, Ian, you mentioned about youth work, and youth work in church is incredible. The youth assemblies are remarkable, absolutely remarkable. But older people, what I said at the beginning, wisdom, experience, and so much more to give to the church, and how to bring the church through some of the challenges it faces. So.
Yes, Neil.
From William Wood's perspective, I see my service as frontline in the mission of the church, caring for older people. We represent Crossreach in a very difficult environment, a very competitive environment. We care in Christ's name. I don't think that's been said this morning, or I may have missed it, I don't know. But we care in Christ's name. We can all reflect on Bible stories, but that is exactly what we do. We do it with humility, we do it with compassion, we do it with love, we do it with dedication. For me, that is the sole quality, or those are the sole qualities that are within all the people I work with. I have massive respect for the people that I work with in terms of their drive and determination to offer the best quality possible. From a service point of view within our service area, like I said, it's very difficult, very competitive. We work with many different organisations and agencies who sometimes find it difficult to understand the ethos of who we're about and what we do and how we do it. That is a barrier sometimes. It's difficult to overcome, but that also is part of my mission, William Wood's mission, to be able to promote the message of what we do and how we do it. We've had many messages of feedback in terms of the type of service that we are, the client group that we care for, how we care for them, the atmosphere of the home. Those are all the things, those are all the ingredients for me to providing a quality service, which I believe what we do.
Well done, thank you.